The first rays of sun were filtering through the branches of the tall pine trees as Detective Andrew Carter pulled his patrol car to the cracked curb. Sitting next to him was his partner, Rick Matthews, a burly man with sharp eyes and an ironic grin that rarely left his face. The silence of the forest, interrupted by a walkie-talkie, no longer seemed calm. In the morning, someone called 911 and reported something terrible not far from the hiking trail. According to the officer's description, everything looks creepy, Rick said, getting out of the car and adjusting the pistol on his belt. The chief asked us to look into it personally, Andrew replied, joining him. If it's connected to crime, a lot of dirt could come to light in the city. They walked along the narrow path in silence all the way to the crime scene. However, the silence around seemed artificial, no birdsong, no rustling wind. Damn. Rick exhaled quietly, bending over the body. I haven't seen anything like this for a long time, Andrew said hoarsely. His heart beat alarmingly. The victim is a man, about 40 years old, with a carefully shaved head and what looks like a fresh scar or burn on his right forearm. There was no disorder around, no fighting, no signs of intrusion. Perhaps the body was simply planted. Look at his hands, Rick said. Marks from handcuffs or ropes. Exactly. And pay attention to the shoes. Expensive shoes, almost new. We'll collect evidence and call the laboratory. Rick glanced at Andrew. Something tells me this is just the tip of the iceberg. Andrew nodded. Standing over the body, he suddenly felt a cold wave of foreboding. His life had recently been coming apart at the seams as it was. His relationship with his wife had become tense, she had been acting distant lately, and he himself was experiencing vague anxiety. But work is work. The criminal world rarely leaves room for chance, and this murder was definitely something important. The two of them began to examine the crime scene, looking for empty cartridges, prints, and pieces of fabric. Nothing significant. Okay, he finally said, straightening up. Let's wait for the guys from forensics. And then to the sheriff. I think he's already full of questions. I agree, Rick responded. We'll have to sit down again at night to report. I love our work. They both understood that from this day everything was just beginning, and although Andrew's heart aches at the memory of Sheila and their 5-year-old son, Liam, for several hours he is forced to forget about family problems and plunge into the cruel reality of the next case. This forest kept too many secrets. Later at the station, sitting at the desk in the sheriff's office, Andrew mechanically flipped through papers. Photos, reports, results of a preliminary examination by a medical examiner. The victim was identified as one Roger Brooks, a resident of a neighboring state who had been missing for several days. Brooks was involved in illegal activities, as far as I understand, said Sheriff Jason Hill, a tall man with dark brown hair that was streaked with gray. But we don't have much evidence yet. Andrew looked up. Connections with traffickers of prohibited substances, with scams, anything specific? The sheriff shook his head. We are checking. Perhaps he was more than just a pawn. You and Rick will have access to any database you need. I would venture to suggest that this is not a single action, but someone's order. Rick, who was standing by the window and listening attentively, briefly interjected. You should have seen the burn on his hand. Looks like there's some kind of symbol there. The expert said that it was too smooth, perhaps made on purpose, like a mark. The sheriff frowned. Figure it out, get to the bottom of it. And Andrew, he nodded, turning to him, keep me posted. This case could have a wide resonance. Everything was done very cleanly. Of course, boss. That evening, when Andrew finally returned home, he found Sheila in the living room, sitting on the sofa with a cup of coffee. Her dark hair fell softly over her shoulders, and her eyes seemed distant. Liam, the son, was already asleep. You're late, Sheila remarked quietly. We have a serious matter. Andrew put the keys on the table. Everything is too unclear. She nodded curtly, avoiding looking him in the eyes. Hungry. There is a casserole in the refrigerator. Thank you, I don't want to. No strength. I'll go take a shower and then go to bed. She nodded. A tense silence hung in the room, as if there was a wall between them. Previously, they would have discussed everything, inside and out. Now everyone was stewing in their own thoughts. Out of the corner of his eye, Andrew noticed how Sheila glanced at his phone, which was lying on the table, as if she was afraid that it was about to ring and tear him away from home for several more hours. But deep down, Andrew was tormented by another question. Why has Sheila been so cold lately? And why does his heart skip a beat with anxiety, not only because of the murder, but also because of some vague, alarming guess that he could not fully formulate? He walked into the bathroom, hoping that the hot water would wash away at least some of the tension that had built up during the day. The next day began with a short convening of the task force. Andrew and Rick agreed to meet with the doctor, who had already carried out some of the examinations. They quickly crossed the hospital corridor and entered the cold room. "Gentlemen," Dr. Clark, a gray-haired, thin man with glasses, greeted them. "Glad you stopped by. I finished the inspection. There are several finds." He pulled out the gurney. The cause of death was a sharp weapon. The weapon was not found. By the way, the burn. It looks like this is a mark, possibly associated with a criminal group. "Can you determine the approximate date of death?" asked Andrew. "Within 36 hours of detection. And one more interesting thing, there is lint on the victim's shirt. Dark brown, possibly from animal fur, but I could be wrong. Sent samples to the laboratory." Rick whistled through his teeth. "Wool. The forest is full of all kinds of living creatures, although you never know what that means. Maybe he was in someone's house where there is a dog, or in the car," Andrew suggested. "We'll keep it in mind." They thanked the doctor and headed towards the exit. On the way to the station, Rick made several calls, trying to determine the circle of acquaintances of the murdered man. In addition, it was necessary to check which of the locals could be associated with the deceased. The small town where they lived, although quiet at first glance, had in the past a reputation as a transshipment point for illegal transactions. "We need more evidence." Rick parked the car at the station. "I think we need to bring up the old files." "I agree." Andrew got out of the car. "I'll try to contact our informant later. Maybe Sid Baines, the bar owner, heard something." Rick grinned. Sid could definitely hear. He is always aware of city gossip, and the bar is a favorite place for black deals. They went to their offices, and Andrew, closing the door behind him, opened his laptop, plunging into work. But thoughts about home haunted me. Sheila is avoiding me. No, I shouldn't think about this now, he told himself, realizing that if a lead in the case was not found soon, the authorities would be unhappy. Suddenly, the phone rang. "Carter," Andrew introduced himself briefly. "Hey, buddy," Sid's familiar voice was heard on the phone. "I heard that you are interested in the recent strange guests of our town. Maybe you'll come see me in the evening. There are a couple of stories worth hearing." Andrew smiled slightly. "Okay, Sid, I'll be with you at 7. Thank you for calling." As he hung up the phone, he felt a rush of adrenaline. This might be their first real clue leading to the answer to who killed Roger Brooks. And not only did he kill, but why did he choose this particular forest in this city? Andrew, before going to the bar, decided to drop by home before he could open the door. He heard voices from the kitchen. Sheila was talking to someone in a quiet, excited whisper. When he appeared, everything immediately calmed down. "Andrew," the wife exclaimed in surprise, putting the phone on the table. "You're early." There was tension on her face, which she tried unsuccessfully to hide. "I decided to quickly change clothes and continue working," he answered briefly, noticing how her hands were shaking. "Who did you talk to?" "Yes, with Melissa," Sheila answered. "She was just asking how we were doing." Andrew raised an eyebrow suspiciously. "Melissa Baker, Sheila's best friend. Nothing strange, right?" However, it seemed to him that Sheila was too tense. Okay. How's Liam?" "Watching cartoons in the living room. Can I call him?" He shook his head. "Let him rest. I'll just be a minute anyway. We have a lot of work today." He left the kitchen to go to the bedroom and change clothes, and noticed Sheila hastily taking the phone from the table, clutching it in her hand. He suddenly felt uneasy. She had not behaved so secretly before. She usually left her phone wherever she had to. Maybe I'm making things up too much, he thought, but the worm of doubt has already set in. As he walked back to the front door, a few minutes later, Sheila approached him. Maybe you could at least sit down for a cup of coffee. I see you're on edge. Thank you, but I don't have time. He smiled briefly, avoiding long eye contact. I'll be back later. Okay, she said quietly. Take care of yourself. Closing the door behind him, Andrew exhaled slowly. And damn, he had a bad feeling about it. On the way to the bar, Andrew involuntarily plunged into memories. 5 years ago, life seemed cloudless. He married Sheila after a year of beautiful courtship. Flowers, dates, a sea of smiles. Then Liam was born, a boy with wide eyes and curly hair, an exact copy of Sheila. It seemed to Andrew then that he had found what he had always dreamed of, a real family, a warm home. His uncle, Jackson Jack Carter, although strict, was still glad that his nephew was able to find personal happiness. Jack, a former military man, taught Andrew discipline, determination, and correct principles. After the death of his parents, Andrew remained the only close person to his uncle. He strictly commanded, "Family is the main thing. Be prepared to do anything to protect your loved ones." Sitting behind the wheel, Andrew smiled bitterly. To protect. And who will now protect him from the feeling that is quietly creeping up to his heart? It was getting dark when he parked outside the Old Road Bar. There were almost no strangers here, only a few cars. Andrew walked inside and saw Sid standing behind the counter. He waved his hand welcomingly. "Andrew, have a seat. Would you like something to drink?" "Only non-alcoholic," the detective refused, approaching the counter. "I'm on duty." Sid nodded approvingly and pushed him a glass of soda with ice. The man was a little older than Andrew, wore a neat beard, and always seemed inviting. A man to whom visitors willingly told more than they intended. "So, what do you hear?" Andrew asked, taking a sip from his glass. "I saw a visitor here the other day, a man of few words, slippery." Sid lowered his voice. "He got into a conflict with some other guy, who then quickly left. It seems they didn't share anything about money. And this has something to do with the murder of Brooks. Well, I don't know for sure. However, that visitor mentioned the name Tom. Tom Doyle, if I'm not mistaken." He said loudly, "Tom will not remain in debt to Marcus." And he also swore at some petty journalist or something like that. He said that this journalist needs to be kept under control. Andrew frowned. The word journalist made his heart clench unpleasantly. Sheila was a journalist before her son was born. Coincidence? And you think this might be connected to our case? "I'm sure there's a thread to something more," Sid replied. "Just be careful. That guy is clearly dealing with serious people." Andrew wrote the name Tom Doyle in his notebook and mentally repeated it several more times. Then he exhaled. "Thank you, Sid. If you find out anything else, contact me." The bartender nodded and wiped his glass. "Certainly. Take care of yourself, friend." Going outside, Andrew looked at the starry sky. The name Tom Doyle did not sound like fiction. This is most likely their first real lead, and the mention of the mysterious Marcus. We need to check the databases. But the word journalist stung him much more. A vague suspicion troubled my soul. Could it really be about Sheila? He shook his head, trying to push away the thoughts that were becoming darker. The next morning at the station, Andrew stumbled into Rick's office. He finished his coffee, leaning casually on the back of his chair. "I have something," Andrew said from the doorway. "Name, Tom Doyle. Need to check." "Tom Doyle?" Rick raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like something from an action movie. I'll search our database. Sit down." They opened a database and entered a name. A few pop-up mentions. Thomas Doyle, 38, has previous convictions for fraud and extortion. Connected with a certain Marcus Wells, a large businessman whom the police suspected of corruption, but had no direct evidence. "Here it is." Rick pointed at the screen. "Marcus Wells. This name has already surfaced in the criminal environment, so perhaps the murdered Brooks was a bargaining chip in their affairs. There's one more thing, Andrew frowned. The bartender heard someone swearing at the journalist. And what? Rick looked at him, narrowing his eyes. My wife worked in the city news office before Liam was born. I don't want to drive the horses, but I have a bad feeling. A young officer entered the room. Detective Carter, the sheriff is waiting for you. Urgently. When Andrew entered the sheriff's office, he handed him several documents. New details about Brooks have come to light. Before his death, he dated Tom Doyle. Perhaps they had a quarrel. Looks like we're on the trail. I want you and Rick to go to Doyle's house and try to talk. But be careful, he has a bad reputation. Sir, Andrew responded, glancing briefly at Rick, we'll do everything. Leaving the office, they looked at each other. Rick chuckled nervously. I'm glad that we have at least some leads. But I don't like the name Wells. There are too many rumors around this man. Some say that he sponsors charity, while others say that he is playing a double game with the mafia. Andrew just nodded, remembering Uncle Jack's words. Sometimes people aren't what they seem. Don't relax, stick to the facts and intuition. And now his intuition was screaming that this story with Doyle would lead them to more terrible secrets, and somehow affect his wife. In the evening, returning home after running around the city, Andrew found Liam drawing cars in the living room. The boy, seeing his father, jumped up joyfully and ran to him. Dad, look, I drew your police car. Andrew picked up his son and smiled. Great, buddy. This is the coolest drawing. Where's Mom? Sheila came out of the bedroom, putting on a smile. Hello, I'm here. Andrew put Liam on the floor, and he ran off to the toys. We were left alone, and tension again hung between the spouses like a thick fog. Tired? Sheila asked softly. Maybe I should make you some tea. Yes, perhaps. Today was a difficult day. Andrew hesitated, looking into her eyes. He wanted to ask questions. What is happening? Who are you talking to on the phone? Why did you start moving away? But the words got stuck in my throat. Here, Sheila handed him the mug. I hope it helps you relax. Andrew was about to thank her when he noticed how the corners of her lips twitched and her gaze fell down, as if she wanted to say something, but did not dare. Everything is fine? He asked quietly. She just nodded. I'm just worried about your work. It's dangerous. He saw that he was lying. But so far I had no evidence, and suspicions without facts are empty jealousy. He remained silent, hoping that the truth would soon emerge on its own. And yet a small voice cracked in my chest. She is deceiving. She's not telling you something. The rest of the evening passed in tense silence. The next morning, Andrew and Rick were already planning to go to Tom Doyle's house, when suddenly an intern jumped up to Andrew, holding out an envelope. There's a letter for you, detective, with the inscription, personally in hand. No return address. Andrew frowned, took the envelope, and opened it. Inside is a copy of a newspaper clipping from 5 years ago, a photo of Sheila interviewing a certain Thomas Doyle, signed as a business consultant. On the back was written in pencil, she's lying. She had an affair with him back then. What the hell is this? Andrew muttered, feeling the blood pounding in his temples. Rick noticed that his partner's face had turned stony. Hey, what's there? Andrew showed him the clipping. It looks like someone wants to warn me, or touch a nerve, and a note that my wife is having an affair with this guy. Rick sighed, realizing how much this could hurt. Listen, don't rush to conclusions. Maybe it's fake. Old article, interview. Who knows? But Andrew's heart was already squeezing with unbearable suspicions. After all, this explains why she has been acting so strange recently. If Sheila really had an affair with Doyle, she could still keep in touch. What if he's involved in murder? I have to talk to her, Andrew muttered through clenched teeth. Calm down, Rick intervened. First, let's look into the matter. Perhaps someone is trying to confuse us. However, Andrew couldn't simply erase, she's lying, from his mind. It's as if this phrase stuck in my memory. In the afternoon, they managed to find Tom Doyle's old address. A small house, darkness outside the windows, as if it had been abandoned. Neighbors reported that Doyle was rarely there and behaved rudely. They couldn't get inside without a warrant until the sheriff issued one. "We'll come back later," Rick suggested, leaving there. "Yes," Andrew nodded, looking out the empty windows. "But I'm no longer comfortable with all this." Arriving at the house, Andrew found Sheila in the hallway. Her face flashed with alarm when she saw his gaze. "Why are you so gloomy?" she asked, trying to smile. "Can I see an article you did 5 years ago?" He began without any detours. Interview with Tom Doyle. Sheila looked at him for a second, as if not understanding what he was talking about. Then she bit her lip. "Why do you need it?" "We are conducting an investigation in which this person appears. I need some information." She frowned, her eyes darting. I'm not sure I saved it. Perhaps this was only in the editorial office's electronic archive. But Andrew knew that she always had copies of her best articles. He saw them in the attic, in boxes. "Sheila," he sighed heavily, "tell the truth. Did you know Tom Doyle?" She froze for a moment, crumpling the edge of her jacket in her hands. "We met a couple of times when I was doing the material. Nothing more, I swear." Andrew heard her voice tremble and caught a subtle tension in her gaze. No matter how much he wanted to believe his wife, despair settled in his soul. After all, the letter from the police station says the opposite. "Okay," he said finally, trying to hide his heartbeat. "If you find a clipping, show it. I need it." She nodded without looking him in the eyes. He closed the bedroom door behind him and sat on the bed, clutching the photo from the letter in his pocket. It seemed to him that the ground was disappearing from under his feet. But Uncle Jack always taught him to be strong. "Don't let your feelings cloud your judgment. We'll have to pull ourselves together and continue the investigation, and perhaps to dig not only under the suspects, but also under his own wife." Andrew sat in his office, nervously looking at the envelope with the newspaper clipping he received yesterday. The letter lay on the table, as if it was burning with its gaze. The detective's mind had difficulty combining the official part information about the murder of Roger Brooks with personal pain and growing suspicion of his own wife. The large headline of an old newspaper stood before my eyes: "Business Consultant Tom Doyle and His View on Regional Development." And next to it is a photo of a smiling Sheila holding a microphone. In appearance, she was probably in the last months of pregnancy, or at least already expecting a child. In the photo, a loose blouse covered her figure, but something in her face betrayed a special softness. Andrew remembered that period well, or he thought he remembered. Rick looked into the office, saw his partner's concentrated look, and sighed heavily. "Listen, we are now going to the criminologists. Remember those lint found on Brooks' clothes? It seems like something has popped up there. Will you come with me?" Andrew, looking up from his thoughts, grabbed the printed materials into a folder and nodded. "Certainly. The sooner we gather evidence, the better." They left the darkened corridor and headed to the laboratory located at the other end of the building. The forensic specialist, a short man named Garcia, was waiting for them behind the glass doors, holding a folder and some kind of small transparent bag in his hands. "Glad you stopped by," Garcia began. "We analyzed samples taken from Brooks' clothing. At first, they thought it was dog hair, but it turned out to be carpet fiber. Dark brown, dense, possibly made from high-quality carpet, the kind that is laid in expensive offices or hotel rooms. That is, he was probably not killed in the forest," Andrew suggested. "Perhaps they brought it there after. Or the murder happened in a place where there was such a carpet, and then they moved it," Rick said. "Can we check where in our town this type of coating is used?" Garcia shrugged. "We can count such hotels on our fingers, and there are few business centers. In addition, the carpet is quite specific and can be custom-made." "Thank you, Garcia. This is an important tip," Andrew thanked and took the bag with the samples. Walking out of the laboratory, Rick rubbed his chin thoughtfully. "You will have to visit several objects, expensive offices, hotels. What if there are traces, cameras, witnesses. Agree, but let's prepare properly. I doubt anyone would be happy to see us if there's something illegal going on, Andrew replied, remembering how often business people like Marcus Wells shut their doors to the police. The mention of Marcus pricked him again. After all, it was this last name that came up along with Tom Doyle, the man who was rumored to be related to Sheila. After lunch, Andrew decided to stop by the city library, where the archives of local newspapers and magazines were kept. He wanted to find the original of Sheila's article and trace further mention of the name Tom Doyle. Rick remained at the station, coordinating a search warrant with someone. The library was located in an old building with high ceilings. The old brickwork, narrow windows, and the smell of dusty books put me in a special mood. Andrew walked to the racks of newspaper files, found the year he was looking for, and sat down at a wooden table under a humming lamp. While leafing through old issues, he noticed a photo, the same one that was in his letter. Article from Sheila business consultant Tom Doyle. There were other materials, small notes related to economic problems, including some critical comments by Doyle himself about city authorities. Then he presented himself as an investor who helped develop small businesses in the district. So they didn't meet in a hurry, Andrew muttered, looking through the publications. Sheila interviewed him several times over the course of a month. I didn't even know. Another article mentioned, Seminar for Entrepreneurs supported by Marcus Wells, hosted by Tom Doyle. There were few photographs, but references to Marcus and Tom went hand in hand. There were also short notes in which the name of the local business club operating at that time was mentioned. Interesting, Andrew thought, leafing through the clippings. Since when did Sheila become so close to these people? I never really talked about it at home. Having left the money for the photocopies, Andrew left the library with a heavy feeling. It turned out that Sheila and Tom worked closely together for at least a month, had dialogues, and perhaps saw each other constantly. And if during this period she was already pregnant. Unpleasant guesses ran through her body in a trembling wave. However, he could not accuse her without direct evidence. Facts first, Andrew reminded himself of Uncle Jack's words. But already now the facts showed that his wife was clearly lying to him, saying, a couple of times when I did the material, nothing more. That evening, when Andrew returned, Liam was already asleep, and Sheila was washing dishes in the kitchen, absent-mindedly looking out the window. She looked tired and thoughtful. He quietly entered and stood next to her. She shuddered in surprise and dropped the plate from her hands, which clattered loudly on the wash basin. "Oh, I scared you," she whispered, turning to her husband. They just looked at each other for a minute without saying a word. Andrew noticed something alarming in her eyes, either fear or melancholy. "Sorry," he said finally, "it's a hard day." She wanted to answer something, but at that moment her phone, lying on the table, rang. Sheila rushed to grab the phone. Andrew only had time to notice the word Melissa flashing on the screen before his wife turned off the call, looking at him strangely nervously. "Why didn't you answer?" he asked quietly. Sheila looked away. "You know, it's late already. I'll talk tomorrow. Probably nothing important." She fell silent and was about to leave the kitchen, but Andrew gently touched her shoulder to stop her. "I wanted to talk frankly, to ask, who is Tom Doyle for you? What are you involved in? Why are you lying?" But I couldn't. The words froze. Sheila stroked his cheek with a trembling hand and quickly left the room. He remained, looking at the dark water in the sink, at the fragments of a broken plate, as broken as his belief in an ideal family life. The morning started with a wake-up call from Rick. "Andrew, get up. The sheriff called us to his place. There's a lead on Tom Doyle, and we need to go right now." As soon as he put down the phone, the bedroom door opened slightly, and Sheila appeared on the threshold in a dressing gown. For a brief moment, their eyes met. She just whispered, "Be careful." He walked past, briefly touched her shoulder, and nodded. No kisses like before, no warm hugs. The tension was too palpable, and both understood it, but neither dared to take the first step towards an honest conversation. The sheriff received them in his office, holding a folder with documents in his hands. Our guys found a car that may have belonged to Tom Doyle. The car is parked in a junkyard outside the city. The officers have already left. I want you two to go and do a thorough inspection. Was the car thrown into a landfill? Rick shrugged his shoulders in surprise. It looks like an attempt to get rid of evidence. Exactly. Perhaps there is something left there. Get out quickly, the sheriff ordered. Andrew and Rick got into a company car and sped along a country highway. Outside the windows flashed dull landscapes, sparse gas stations, roadside cafes, fields. The gloomy weather added to the oppressive atmosphere. When they arrived, the landfill was a chaotic pile of rusty buildings and twisted parts. An unpleasant smell of burning and metal hung in the air. A couple of patrol officers were already on site, cordoning off the area with warning tape. Here she is. One of the officers nodded towards the black SUV, whose front part was smashed. There were cracks in the windshield, and the engine compartment was slightly open. It looked like the car had been hastily abandoned. Andrew walked closer and looked inside through the driver's door. It's a mess. Wires were pulled out, license plates were removed. But perhaps there is still something left. Rick raised an eyebrow, looking around the back seats. Look, there are traces here, or... No, it looks like a spilled liquid, maybe oil, but who knows? We need to take a sample. And there are leather gloves lying around. He put on rubber gloves, carefully picked up a couple of objects, and handed them over to the forensic experts who had already arrived. Andrew, meanwhile, rummaged around in the glove compartment and found a small piece of paper with a phone number. The number was signed with one word M. I hope this is some kind of clue, he said, showing it to Riku. Maybe M. Is this Marcus or someone else? Rick chuckled. Looks like it. Let's check through the database. If we're lucky, we'll find out who owns the number. Returning to the station, they managed to discuss what to do next. Andrew insisted on quickly trying to get a search warrant for Tom Doyle's house, or better yet, finding out where he was now. But Tom seemed to have disappeared. Maybe Marcus Wells is hiding it, Rick suggested. If Doyle is really his man, then he won't just show up. Andrew frowned. But there is talk in the city that Marcus has an office in a mansion on the outskirts, where he holds business meetings in an informal setting. It's quite possible that the carpet there is brown and luxurious. Let's check, Rick suggested. But we need a reason, otherwise they won't even let us in. When they arrived at the station, one of the operatives called out to them. Detective Carter, we have a subject in custody who was seen with Doyle a couple of weeks ago. The guy runs an auto parts store. Maybe he'll clear things up. The detainee's name was Donnie Watson, a lanky, bald man in his 40s. He clearly didn't like being here in the interrogation room. He sat with his lips pursed, fiddling with his cap in his hands. Andrew and Rick walked in and closed the door. Donnie, Andrew said, we need to find out what connects you with Tom Doyle. You were seen talking to him in the Old Road Bar parking lot. Yeah, I don't actually know anything, Donnie muttered, looking away. He came and asked if I had any friends who could quickly change the license plates on the car. The car, which was later found in a landfill, Rick clarified, crossing his arms. Donnie swallowed. How do I know? I said that I don't do this and advised him to fuck off. And he threatened that if I told anyone, I would get in trouble. That's it. Andrew narrowed his eyes. Remember, he talked about some business, about money, about the people with whom he cooperates. Maybe he mentioned the name Marcus. Donnie became even more nervous and began to breathe faster. Said that M. My duty will not be ignored, and I must keep my mouth shut. I don't know who this M is, I swear. He was silent for a second, then added. Tom also asked me if I had seen a journalist nearby. I really wanted to chat with her. Andrew felt his insides grow colder. Which journalist? Don't know. He only said that she has some materials that should not be made public. Apparently, he was worried. He even said that he was ready to come to an amicable agreement with her If only she would remain silent. Rick noticed how his partner tensed, but only nodded. Okay, Donnie, thank you. If you remember anything else, call, and don't do anything stupid. Donnie hastily shook his head and was soon escorted out of the room by an officer. Andrew ran his hand over his face, feeling his heartbeat loudly in his ears. The journalist Tom is talking about is almost certainly Sheila. But what kind of materials does she have on her hands? Perhaps, sometime in the past, Sheila dug up dirt on Marcus or Tom himself, and now they are blackmailing her. Rick tried to find the words. Andrew, maybe we should talk to Sheila directly. Explain that we have reasonable grounds to believe that she is involved. Yes, but we haven't been talking much lately. Perhaps afraid or... Andrew cut himself off. You know, I'll still ask. I'm left with no choice. He understood that now he could no longer delay. If Sheila is hiding something, and she clearly is, this could be dangerous for both her and him. Too many dark threads lead to Tom Doyle, and the question is no longer only about personal betrayal, but about a possible threat to life. Andrew decided that before talking to Sheila, he should try to put pressure on her friend. After all, Melissa Baker, her best friend, had long known about some of Sheila's secrets. Perhaps it will crack and at least lift the veil. He waylaid Melissa as she left the fitness center in the evening. A short but slender blonde, Melissa saw Andrew at the door and immediately tensed. Oh, hi, Andrew. Did something happen? She was clearly nervous and quickly looked around. There were people around, but everyone was in a hurry about their own business. Let's go for a walk, he suggested. They walked along the sidewalk, away from the flow of gym-goers. Andrew noticed Melissa clutching the strap of her bag. He got straight to the point. I need to know what's going on with Sheila. Why is she acting so strange? And what do you know about this? Melissa opened her mouth as if she wanted to be indignant, but then sighed heavily. Andrew, I'm not sure I have the right to say anything. Sheila is my friend, and we promised each other to keep certain things a secret. A secret from her husband, he asked bitterly. Listen, we are talking about serious danger. If Sheila is related to Tom Doyle. Okay, stop, Melissa interrupted, stopping in the middle of the sidewalk. Tom Doyle. Do you know? She bit her lip and shook her head in understanding. So it came out after all. Andrew clenched his fists. So she really has known him for a long time. Melissa hesitated. Yes, I won't tell you all the details, but even before Liam was born, he and Tom crossed paths. She was reporting. She really liked being in journalism then. And Tom, he then very skillfully approached her. You understand what sweet speeches a man with money and connections can make. Her voice trembled. It showed pity for Sheila and fear at the same time. So there was an affair between them? Andrew asked bluntly. Melissa remained silent, only nervously shrugging her shoulders. I can't say exactly how long, but I know that Sheila suffered for a long time because of this. She wanted to move away from Tom, but he kept her on a hook. He said that he would reveal some of her secrets, which would destroy her career. She was pregnant then. She was afraid that you would understand everything wrong. The girl stopped short, as if she had given away too much. So she thought that I would misunderstand what exactly. Andrew said quietly but firmly, trying to restrain himself so as not to shout. I don't know that, but definitely something connected with the child. Melissa bit her lip. Sorry, but I don't know further. Then Sheila just suddenly quit journalism. I was surprised. She said that she needed to take care of her family, that it was time to stop, and I, as a friend, supported her. Andrew felt his insides grow colder with every word. This means that Sheila left her career not only because of her son, but also because of her fear of Tom Doyle. But what exactly could he know? How could he blackmail her? Tell me, do you know anything about Tom's connections with Marcus Wells? He asked finally. Melissa nodded. I heard out of the corner of my ear that Tom was Wells' right hand in some dirty affairs. They were involved in real estate fraud, something related to illegal schemes. Sheila accidentally dug up incriminating evidence on them, and apparently they decided that since she was pregnant, and had a family, they could intimidate her. "Why were you silent all this time?" he asked, not hiding his reproach. "Because Sheila begged me not to interfere and not to tell you. She said that if they find out about this, Tom might get to you. I was afraid for her and for you." She turned away, wiping away tears, a lump of resentment squeezing her throat. Andrew realized that there was no point in scolding her. "Thank you for saying something." Andrew touched her shoulder. "And please, if Sheila contacts me again, try to convince her to cooperate with me. Otherwise, everything will only get worse." Melissa nodded silently, and they parted at the traffic light. Andrew got into the car, feeling pain and anger burning inside his soul in equal measure. So, blackmail, fear, secrets, and yet Sheila didn't say a word. How can I trust her now, and how could I not see this before? But behind the outer coldness, there was desperation. After all, if Tom is really connected with the murder of Brooks, then Sheila could potentially be the next victim. That evening, when Andrew returned home, he found Sheila in the living room, thoughtfully looking at an old photo album. Liam was already asleep, and there was an oppressive silence in the house. There was a faint smell of brewed tea coming from the kitchen. Andrew sat down silently next to him and noticed the photo, their wedding. How they smile, how happily they look at each other. It seemed like an eternity had passed. "We were so carefree, weren't we?" Sheila asked quietly, sliding her finger along the plastic cover. "Yes." Andrew sighed heavily. "But times change." She slammed the album shut and put it aside. For a while, they both just sat there, staring at the floor. Finally, he broke the silence. "Sheila, I know that you communicated with Tom Doyle much closer than you admit, that he was blackmailing you, and that this has to do with your past work in journalism." She jumped up. Fear flashed in her eyes. "Who told you this? Who cares?" Andrew snapped. "This is true." Sheila clasped her hands as if she wanted to stop shaking. I don't want to discuss this. Everything is in the past." "In the past?" "He mentions you now, Sheila. Moreover, he is involved in a murder that we are investigating. You are in danger." She lowered her head. "Tom won't touch me if I don't interfere. I have no reason to reopen this topic." But Andrew couldn't believe his ears. "No reason? What about murder? I need evidence to put him away. And you can help. Understand, Tom is not just your youthful mistake. He's a criminal, and if we don't stop him, there may be more victims." "You don't understand." Sheila flared up. "These people are Marcus, Tom, their accomplices. They have long arms. They can destroy everything that is dear to me." Her voice broke, and she bit her lip so as not to burst into tears. Andrew stood up abruptly and came closer. "But you've already lost the most important thing, my trust," he said quietly. "How can I look at you and not think, is Liam really my son? After all, people whisper that Tom could be his father." At these words, Sheila turned pale, as if from a blow. Lips trembled. "What? What are you talking about, Andrew? Liam is your son." He saw how suffering distorted her face, but his pain was also unbearable. "Then let me run a paternity test. And if everything is confirmed, then at least I will get rid of these nightmare thoughts." She dropped the cup from her hands. It hit the floor and broke. The ringing sound scattered throughout the room. You don't understand what you're saying. I don't want to do this. This is insulting. It's insulting that you kept quiet for years about your former relationship with Tom." Andrew's voice rose. "Look where we've gone. I can't believe you. Unless you prove otherwise, I will conduct the test without your consent." Sheila covered her mouth with her hand, tears sliding down her cheeks in large drops. She staggered and moved towards the wall, as if looking for support. "Why are you doing this? Liam loves you, and you love him." "Yes, I do. But I can't live this lie anymore. If he really is my son, fine. If not—" He didn't finish. He threw up his hands helplessly. Sheila turned her back to him in despair, and he walked out, slamming the door loudly. He knew that he was acting cruelly, but he could not help it. Doubts tore his soul, and disbelief burned from within. Perhaps the truth is now indispensable, and even if this truth turns out to be terrible, You need to be ready to accept it. Later that night, as Andrew sat in his car, his hands shaking on the steering wheel, his phone rang. The number was unknown. A quiet voice said, "You need help. I know how to reach Tom, but be careful. Know this, Marcus is in on it too. He will not forgive if his plans fail." "Who is this?" Andrew whispered. But they hung up on the other end. He didn't recognize the person, but judging by the tone, it was someone from Tom or Marcus' circle who wanted to help. Or is it a trap? He looked out the window at his house, at the light in one of the bedrooms where Sheila was probably crying. His heart sank in pain, but he must go to the end. Everything is at stake: truth, justice, his family, and perhaps his life. The next morning, Andrew left Sheila at home and went to the station without saying a word. He could not shake the feeling that everything was approaching a denouement. When he entered the office, Rick was already hastily collecting papers. "Hello. Today we received an interesting tip. One person, Wayne Roberts, is ready to testify about Doyle, but is afraid for his life. We are going to interrogate him in a safe place." Andrew put his jacket on the chair and quickly asked, "Where and when?" "In an old hangar on the outskirts. He said he would get there unnoticed. It seems that he is involved in some of Tom's deals, but wants to pay off justice by betraying the boss." "Great. Let's go. Let's just take a couple of patrol officers for cover." They loaded into the police car, and Rick started the engine. The journey took about 20 minutes. All this time, both remained silent. Finally, abandoned buildings, hangars with peeling paint, and piles of scrap metal appeared. Everything around breathed desolation and gray melancholy. The appointed place is the old hangar No. 4. The iron gates have been torn off in half, and there is semi-darkness inside. When the car arrived, they got out and looked around. A minute later, a thin man with shaking hands appeared from the depths. Are you from the police?" he asked, looking around. "Yes," Andrew answered, showing his ID. "Wayne Roberts?" "Yes. I need you to protect me. I'm afraid they'll find me." "Tell me everything." Rick entered the conversation, recording on a voice recorder. "How do you know Tom Doyle, and what can you tell me?" Wayne swallowed, apparently gathering his thoughts. "A couple of years ago, I worked in a real estate agency, which was financed by Marcus Wells. There were frauds, resales of houses at inflated prices, and fake documents. Tom Doyle was the one who resolved the dark issues. He intimidated the owners if they did not agree to sell. He also engaged in extortion from competitors." He took a deep breath. "In the end, I realized that everything was going somewhere wrong. I wanted to leave. But Tom threatened that if I revealed the scheme, I would regret it. And I fell silent. But recently I saw Tom, how he was arguing with Roger Brooks, and Tom noticed me too. Brooks was then found murdered. I realized that I could be next." Andrew and Rick looked at each other. This means that Brooks, who was killed in the forest, definitely had an affair with Tom. Everything fits together. "Do you know anything specific about the role of Marcus?" asked Andrew. "He's the godfather of this scheme," Wayne whispered, "but it's difficult to find direct evidence against him. Tom is just a performer, but Marcus has a mansion on the outskirts where secret meetings are held in the basement. They say some documents are kept there. If you find all this, you can pin them both down. But I don't have the strength to get the papers. I won't make it there alive." At that moment, their conversation was interrupted by the sound of a streetcar clapping and the cry of a patrolman. "Stand, hands up." Andrew and Rick rushed out of the hangar. There was a black SUV parked next to their car. The unknown man, seeing the police, stepped on the gas and sped away, almost hitting a patrolman. Fortunately, no shots were fired from the car windows. Apparently, they did not dare to open conflict. "Follow him," Rick shouted, trying to grab the radio. "The car has no license plates. Try to catch up." The patrolman hurried in pursuit, but the SUV managed to disappear in a cloud of dust. Andrew swore and turned to Wayne. "Do you see? It sounds like your old friends don't want you to talk. You'll have to come with us. We will provide a defense, but you must give formal testimony." Wayne turned pale, but nodded. "Okay, I agree. Just don't protect me, for God's sake." Returning to the station, they filed temporary protection for Wayne, placing him in a secure location until he could testify. The sheriff, having listened to the situation, ordered, "So we need to strengthen the evidence against Marcus and Tom. Let's go get a search warrant for the mansion, but Wells will probably pay off and put pressure from above. Be prepared for political confrontation." Andrew knew that the evidence against Marcus was no small matter, but determination grew along with the desire to avenge the broken life and maybe even save it. After all, if these people are stopped, perhaps Sheila will finally be freed from their influence, and then maybe something else can be fixed. He looked at Rick. "We must speed up. Tom doesn't sit still, and if Sheila is his potential problem, then she is in danger too." Rick put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "I know, dude. We will get through this together. The main thing is not to explode from emotions." Andrew nodded, but understood that it was becoming increasingly difficult to hold on. The phantom pain of the possibility that Liam was not his son drilled into his brain. However, now he had a job and a duty to cover these scum before they dealt an even bigger blow. While the formalities of obtaining a warrant were going on as usual, Andrew decided to find out who Marcus Wells was more closely in an informal setting. He remembered that Marcus owned an upscale restaurant in the city center. It is there that social meetings often take place, and there he can be seen in person. "I'll go to this restaurant under the guise of an ordinary customer. Maybe I'll be able to meet Wells himself," he told Rick. Sid Baines promised to find out when Marcus plans to appear there. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Rick frowned. "Marcus is quite smart and dangerous. If he finds out about you, you could get into trouble." "I won't get into trouble. I'll just observe. Maybe it will be possible to find out what kind of people surround him, what kind of deals are taking place there." Rick agreed, but insisted that Andrew be as careful as possible. In the evening, having changed into simple clothes and leaving the token in his pocket, Andrew went to the same Stardust Company restaurant. The building looked impressive: glass panels, soft lighting, expensive cars in the parking lot. At the sight of this luxury, his stomach sank unpleasantly. How much illegal money was invested in these walls? A doorman stood at the entrance, greeting guests. Andrew went into the hall and ordered a table for one. Having sat down at a table overlooking the central hall, he began to study the visitors. Soon Sid Baines approached him, now without a bartender's apron, but in clothes for a visitor, a strict dark jacket, neatly styled hair. "Hi, buddy," Sid said quietly, sitting down. "I found out that Marcus will come here in about half an hour for a business meeting." "With whom?" asked Andrew. "Not sure, but they say he will arrive accompanied by a security guard. Usually he has one or two fighters. We have to be on our guard." Andrew nodded, ordered mineral water from the waiter, and tried to look casual. But inside, everything was cramped with tension. Finally, after 40 minutes, a stately man of about 50, in an expensive suit, with smoothly combed hair, appeared at the entrance. He was accompanied by a short, burly man in a leather jacket. The businessman's appearance inspired confidence, a confident gait, a courteous smile for the staff. But Andrew felt a wolfish grin behind this mask. "It's him, Marcus Wells," Sid whispered. Andrew tried not to stare, but still cast sidelong glances from time to time. Marcus sat down at a table in the side area, which was partially partitioned off by a partition with stained glass windows. He was soon joined by another person, a man in an expensive coat. It was not audible what they were talking about, but judging by the gestures, they were talking about some kind of deal. 10 minutes later, the waiter placed the wine and dishes in front of them. Marcus said something from time to time. The other man nodded. It looks like the negotiations were going well. Suddenly, Sid called out to Andrew, gently nudging him with his elbow. "Look, at the next table, it seems, is one of Tom's helpers. I've seen him a couple of times. I don't know the name, but the face is familiar." Indeed, a rude guy with a tattoo on his neck was sitting at a table nearby, looking first at Marcus and then at the phone. Maybe he's waiting for a signal. I wonder if Doyle will appear himself, Andrew muttered, trying not to look in that direction. However, Tom didn't show up. Marcus, having finished the negotiations, stood up, shook hands with his interlocutor, and left along with the guard. The helper also soon left. Everything lasted no more than half an hour, but even this was enough to make it clear. Marcus is the boss here. He feels confident. He has people at hand ready to carry out his orders. When it was over, Sid looked at Andrew. "What do you think? I don't think we can prove anything without a warrant and a sudden search." But now at least I saw him live. With his eyes, he doesn't look at all like the monster I imagined him to be, but internally, I feel like he's a predator. Sid agreed. He is always neat and smart. Easily bribes the right people. Be careful, Andrew. Thank you, Sid. Order yourself something to drink. I'll pay for it. You helped. Sid waved him off, but smiled gratefully. Andrew got up, paid, and left the restaurant. As soon as he returned home, he saw that the living room was dark, and there was a dim light on in the bedroom. Sheila sat on the bed, slouched, wrapping her arms around herself. "Andrew?" She looked up at him, her voice trembling with tears. "Forgive me, I didn't sleep. I was waiting for you. This is all so scary." He noticed that on the nightstand was a photo of little Liam and a document with a medical barcode. "What is this?" he asked, coming closer. "I agree to the test," she whispered. "But I beg you, when he confirms that Liam is yours, please at least try to understand that I hid everything out of fear of Tom." Andrew felt his heart lighten. Here it was, a desperate attempt to preserve the remnants of trust. "Okay?" He sat down next to me. "I'll do the test tomorrow. But if you want to help not only me, but also yourself, tell us about the materials that you collected against Tom and Marcus. We can use this as evidence." She clasped her hands. "I still have recordings and audio on the recorder from one of their conversations, but I never showed them to anyone. I was afraid that Tom would find out and he could be merciless." "Where are they?" "Hidden in a safe in the attic of Melissa's house. I didn't want to keep them at home. I thought it would be safer." Andrew frowned. "We need to get them as soon as possible. This could be the key to our business." Sheila nodded, bowing her head. "I'll talk to Melissa tomorrow. Please, Andrew, don't think that I wanted to betray you. I just didn't know how to get out of this nightmare." He slowly extended his hand and squeezed her palm. "I hope it's not too late to fix everything." The words hung in the air, full of contradictions. Even though high walls had already been erected between them, there was still a spark of faith smoldering somewhere that, having solved the crime of Tom and Marcus, they would find their way to each other. Or at least they will find the truth that will lead them out of the darkness of mutual suspicion. First thing in the morning, Andrew called a private laboratory and made an appointment to do a paternity test. He didn't want to rush to officially carry out the procedure through the police. There were too many unnecessary ears. So I bought a sample of my DNA from the usual mouth swab and a sample from Liam, who in the evening, with Sheila's consent, took a few hairs from a comb. The specialist said that the result will be ready in a few days. A hurricane of feelings raged inside Andrew. He wanted to hope that everything was fine, that Liam was definitely his son. And at the same time, I was tormented by doubt. What if all this horror is confirmed? Then he did not know how he could continue to look at the child whom he considered his own for 5 years. Returning to the station, he found Rick in a heated discussion with one of the forensic scientists. On the table lay evidence seized from the junkyard, as well as a report on the phone number that was found in the car. "Did you find out anything?" asked Andrew. Rick handed him the printout. "The number belongs to a certain Sarah Wells, Marcus's wife. There was a call from this number on Tom Doyle's phone, apparently Contact M. Could have been Marcus's initial, but it's registered to Sarah." Andrew furrowed his eyebrows. "So Marcus's wife is also in on it. I wonder why she called Tom. Did they have an affair or just business negotiations?" Rick shrugged. "Maybe she knows something and doesn't dare say it. Or maybe she herself is involved. It's hard to say. But here's another thing. We've looked at Sarah's phone activity in recent weeks. It was not uncommon for her GPS signal to overlap with the area where Brooks was later found. It could be a coincidence, but dubious coincidence, Andrew interjected. Looks like we should talk to Sarah Wells. The sheriff, having learned about this, gave the go-ahead. Since the phone number had surfaced, there was a legal basis to invite Sarah for a conversation. But of course, if she herself wants to cooperate. The woman appeared closer to lunch. A tall, striking blonde in her early 40s, wearing a strict classic suit. Her eyes looked wary and cold, accompanied by a lawyer, a fit man with glasses, clearly specializing in rich clients. Mrs. Wells, thank you for your time, Andrew said formally as she sat down at the interrogation table. She answered in an even voice. I came voluntarily to clarify the situation. My husband is a respected businessman, and I do not want his name to be smeared with made-up accusations. We're not pressing charges, Rick put in. We're just conducting a murder investigation. And your number came up in contact with the suspect, Tom Doyle. Sarah barely blinked. Tom works for my husband. Several years ago, he helped us with legal advice on a real estate issue. I could call him on behalf of Marcus. Nothing unusual. Andrew carefully laid out the phone connection printouts in front of her. However, the calls have been quite frequent in the last 2 weeks. And what about your visits to the area where Brooks' body was found? She bit her lip slightly and looked back at the lawyer. He nodded approvingly, they say, answer. In recent weeks, I have been traveling to various charity events, possibly in the same area. It is possible that she could have passed by. I don't have exact records. Her voice remained calm, but her clenched fists showed that she was tense. Mrs. Wells, Rick said, did you know Roger Brooks personally? I don't remember. Fine. We will try to verify everything you said. If it turns out that you are hiding something, it could affect the course of the investigation. You are free now, but please be available for further questions. The lawyer nodded and made it clear that the conversation was over. Sarah stood up and left the room without saying goodbye. When they were alone, Rick exhaled. Just an iron lady, but I feel like she's not telling me something. Andrew agreed. Yes, perhaps it is she who is involved in her husband's darkest affairs, or at least knows about them. However, we still have few specifics. At the end of the day, Andrew received a call from Melissa. She said that in the evening she and Sheila would get the recordings from their hiding place, which were so valuable as evidence against Doyle and Marcus. Andrew planned to drive to Melissa's house to pick them up in person, but something inside him worried. What if Tom is watching them? However, he decided to take a risk. If there is a chance to get real incriminating evidence, you cannot miss it. The main task is to act quickly and carefully. Evening had already descended on the city when Andrew arrived at Melissa's house. A small, cozy building with a well-kept front garden. The light was on only in one window. He got out of the car and looked around. It seems quiet. I met Melissa at the door. She looked worried. Sheila is in my attic looking for a box, Melissa said, letting him inside. I'm nervous. Maybe it's dangerous. Understand. But it's necessary, believe me, Andrew answered. He walked up the narrow stairs to the attic and saw Sheila standing by an old metal cabinet. In her hands were faded folders and a small tape recorder. When Andrew entered, she looked up. I found it. That's all I have left. Here are transcripts of Tom's conversations with someone on the phone, it seems, with Marcus himself, and a couple more audio recordings. Thank you, he said, experiencing a strange mixed feeling of relief and sadness. Let me see. She handed him the folder. He leafed through the yellowed sheets of paper on which phrases and dates were scribbled by hand. Vague mentions of extortion, some amounts, and information about local authorities. Enough to create evidence against Doyle and possibly Marcus if authenticated. Great. Tomorrow I'll give this to the experts, Andrew said, carefully putting the documents into his bag. Sheila pressed her hands to her chest for a moment, as if doubting, is it worth giving away these materials? but then she nodded and covered her eyes with her palm. I hope this helps. Once we conduct an analysis and compare the facts, it will be easier for us to get a full warrant for Wells' house. And then, his words were interrupted by a sudden crash from below, as if the door had been forced open or something had been dropped. Andrew and Sheila looked at each other. The detective's heart skipped a beat. Really, Tom? Stay here, he whispered, drawing his pistol. He carefully walked down the stairs. There was no one in the corridor, but the door to the living room was wide open. Melissa stood near the sofa, pressed against the wall, and a man in a hood and with a pistol in his hand loomed in the doorway. The eyes of a crow, evil. Where is she? The stranger croaked, clearly referring to Sheila. And papers, quickly. Melissa bit her lip, not knowing how to respond. Andrew, trying not to make any noise, approached from behind, pointing his pistol at the armed stranger. Police, drop your weapon. He turned around and swore, but before he could pull the trigger, Andrew fired into the air to warn, and the intruder pulled back. However, he turned out to be not so stupid. He realized that he had little chance in a frontal battle. He rushed sharply to the window, jumped over the windowsill, and disappeared into the night, hiding behind the bushes. Andrew rushed after him, but got out into the street too late. The darkness and the neighbors' fences gave the scoundrel every chance to escape. Returning to the worried Melissa, he tried to calm her down. It's okay, it's okay. I'll call for reinforcements. At that moment, a frightened Sheila appeared on the stairs. God, what happened? Someone broke into the house, Andrew explained, approaching her. Apparently, the one who wanted to get the records. Most likely Tom or Marcus's man. But I managed to scare him away. Fortunately, no one was hurt. Sheila, pale, looked in horror at the shards of glass lying on the floor from a vase broken in the confusion. Melissa was still standing, refusing to let go of her convulsively clenched fists. Forgive me, Sheila whispered to her friend, hugging her. I didn't think it would come to this. Melissa smiled with difficulty. Everything is fine as long as no one gets hurt. Andrew, calling the police, made sure Melissa was safe and agreed to take Sheila home. There was tense silence in the car. Sheila looked out the window, blinking frequently to keep from crying. Thank you for being there, she said dully. You saved us. He just nodded briefly. The words got stuck, scratching my throat painfully. It is natural to save your wife, but to feel that she could have caused all this is unbearable. Returning to the house, Sheila immediately went to check on Liam. He slept peacefully, unaware of the nightmare that was unfolding around him. Andrew looked up at his wife. I'll take the documents to the station. Tomorrow we need to start formal work on them. Okay, she answered quietly. Be careful. Sheila bit her lip. I'll take care of myself and Liam. Andrew placed the evidence bag on the table and felt a sudden surge of tenderness and compassion. No matter how complicated their relationship was, the woman he loved stood before him, and in her eyes one could read a silent, pleading look. Save us. Understand me. He wanted to say sorry, but the words did not come out of his mouth. Instead, he nodded. Rest. Tomorrow will be a hard day. She went into the bedroom, he went to the sofa, where he sat almost until the morning, looking through notes from the folder. I read every word, trying to find a formula to incriminate Tom and Marcus. Sometimes he came across mentions of some dates, numbers, street names. He needed the help of analysts, but already now he felt that the puzzle was beginning to come together. The night seemed unnaturally dark. The rain drummed on the windows, as if announcing an approaching storm. Andrew was sitting in his car in front of the laboratory where he had taken samples for DNA testing a few days ago. He was waiting for a call or letter that could change his whole life. There was no choice left. Either it would be confirmed that Liam was his own son, or the terrible truth would be revealed. His fingers trembled on the steering wheel. His eyes kept flicking to the phone screen. He no longer knew whether to pray for a positive result or prepare mentally for the worst. Sometimes he caught himself thinking absurdly, what if Liam is not mine? Then what? Will I stop loving him? but love and hatred were mixed in the soul with the terrible pain of betrayal. In the back seat was a folder containing printouts of audio recordings and transcripts that Sheila had given him through Melissa. These materials confirmed the involvement of Tom Doyle and, possibly, Marcus Wells in extortion and fraud. The name of the late Brooks flashed in them, dirty machinations were mentioned, but the main task to prove that Tom was guilty of murder had not yet been fully resolved. At some point, the phone buzzed, revealing an incoming message. Detective Carter, the test results are ready. You can pick up a printed report at any time. Dr. Fisher. Andrew closed his eyes, feeling his heart begin to beat faster. He sat in the car for another minute, catching himself wanting to postpone the moment of truth. But it was no longer possible to delay. As he entered the laboratory building, Dr. Fisher, a thin man with glasses, greeted him with a curt nod. He held out a sealed envelope, accompanied by a discreet, "Here are your results." Andrew's throat was dry and his hands were shaking slightly as he opened the envelope. For several seconds, my gaze caught only medical terms and percentages, and finally these words, "The probability of paternity is 0%. It was like a blow to the chest so strong that it became difficult to breathe. Liam is not his son. Everything he believed in for 5 years collapsed overnight. It seemed that the air had become heavy and viscous. The doctor said something about the accuracy of the analysis, about the possibility of repeated tests. But Andrew didn't hear any more. He automatically shook the doctor's hand, thanked him, and in a somewhat half-stunned state left the building. The world suddenly lost its colors. The lanterns on the street seemed blinding, the passers-by seemed like alien shadows. One thought was pounding in my head. Liam is not my son. Sheila deceived me, hid me all this time, and I believed. Getting into the car, he dropped his forehead on the steering wheel for several minutes. Tears came to his eyes, he rarely cried, but here it was impossible to hold back. 5 years of love for a child whom he considered his blood, 5 years of illusions. What to do now? Spit on the result and continue to consider the boy yours, or sever all ties and try to escape the pain? But the bitterness of resentment from Sheila's action outweighed it. She lied for years, lied to her face. Even when he confronted her with a fact, she still did not confess until the very end, for fear of admitting the truth. The phone vibrated. Sheila was calling. He didn't answer the phone. Then she wrote messages, short and excited. "I'm worried. Where are you? Please call. I'm afraid something has happened." But Andrew did not answer, choking on sobs. Anger and despair seethed inside. Finally, he came to his senses and went home. I drove the car almost mechanically. It seemed that everything around had moved into the background. The investigation, the criminals, the danger. The main thing was one thing: the betrayal of his wife. When Andrew opened the door of the house, the clock showed almost midnight. There were suitcases in the hallway, and Sheila was rushing about, collecting her things. At the sight of him, she froze, her face pale, her eyes teary. "Andrew, I didn't know where you were. I thought something happened to you." Her voice trembled. "I was already thinking about taking Liam to Melissa, but..." He quietly slammed the door, walked into the living room, and threw the envelope with the results on the table, without taking his eyes off her. "Read." Sheila, trembling, took the envelope. There were a few moments of silence as she saw the result. Her eyes filled with tears. "Andrew, I..." "What? What do you say now?" he asked hoarsely, barely containing his rage. "You lied to me about the most important thing in my life." Sheila covered her face with her hands. Tears flowed down my cheeks. She frantically tried to speak. "I'm sorry. I didn't know how to tell you the truth. I was hoping Liam was yours. I was afraid Tom would do something terrible." At the name Tom, Andrew's heart sank even more. He saw the face of Tom Doyle, the same scoundrel whom he suspected of murder, lying, intimidation. "Tom is Liam's father?" he asked in an icy tone. She shook her head. I don't know exactly." "What do you mean, you don't know?" He raised his voice, although he tried to control himself. "I had a relationship, short, but..." She was breathing hard from tears, with Tom, and there was another man. It all got out of control. I was confused and scared. Andrew closed his eyes, clenching his fists tightly. So she's not even sure who gave birth to her? This is beyond all understanding. I loved you, he said, looking into her face, distorted with grief. I wanted to build a family with you. I tried for you and Liam. And you just trampled everything. Sheila fell to her knees, crying. I know that I had to admit right away. I was afraid of ruining everything. Andrew's heart was breaking, but his righteous anger overshadowed his compassion. Do you know what's offensive? You didn't think about me, that I also have the right to know the truth. You didn't spare me, Sheila. He walked into Liam's room and saw him sleeping peacefully, clutching a soft toy. He remembered those moments when he taught the boy to ride a bicycle, took him to the park, and read him bedtime stories. And now everything is in question. Will you really have to give up the child you love just because his real parents betrayed you? But the answer inside sounded merciless. Sheila stepped over him, and he couldn't continue to pretend that everything was fine. Returning to the living room, he found his wife in the same position. She was sobbing, holding the edge of the sofa. Andrew, maintaining apparent calm, said firmly, "Pack up and leave." Sheila looked up. "Andrew, please, I'll do anything. Just don't kick me out." "Go away," he repeated. "I need time and space. I can't live under the same roof now with a woman who lied to me about everything." "And Liam," she whispered, "take him with you. Don't deprive him of your home. I don't want quarrels. I don't want scandals in front of the child." Moreover, his voice trembled. Sheila seemed to have received a blow from these words. "Please, he loves you. You are his dad. I don't know who I am to him anymore." "Go away, Sheila," Andrew said harshly. She did not dare to argue, although it was terribly difficult. She collected her already packed things, quietly went to the child's room, and woke up Liam. He asked, sleepily rubbing his eyes, "Mom, where are we going? Where's Dad?" Sheila looked at Andrew, and her face contorted in pain. Andrew turned away, not wanting to see the boy's tears. He understood how cruel it was, but at that moment anger and a sense of betrayal took over. He couldn't bring himself to console the child. The door closed behind them. Andrew was left standing alone in the empty living room. It seemed that time stood still, and a gaping emptiness formed in my soul. The house, once filled with Liam's joyful cries and Sheila's gentle smile, was now cold and empty. "Damn," he muttered, walking up to the wall where family photographs hung. One photo shows the happy couple holding Liam in their arms. He swiped the photo and threw it forcefully onto the floor. The glass shattered and shards splashed across the floor. Thus ended their illusion of family. In the morning, as the cloudy dawn broke, Andrew woke up on the couch with a leaden feeling in his chest. The events of last night were reality, not a bad dream. The house was filled with a suffocating silence. He automatically stood up and wanted to go to the kitchen and ask Sheila to make coffee, but he immediately realized that she was not there. Then he looked at the nursery. The door is ajar, the crib is neatly made, the toys are just as Liam left them. The tip of a fishing rod from a construction set stuck out of the box, as if reminiscent of evenings together when they built castles and dreamed up adventures. "Damn," Andrew whispered again. My legs seemed to give way. Later, he was forced to go to the police station. There was nothing to do. Work remained the only place where he could lose himself in business. On the way, I stopped at a local cafe and got some coffee to go. The barista, who knew Andrew by sight, asked, "You look pale today, detective. Everything is fine?" "It's okay," he said shortly, shaking his head. Even without a mirror, Andrew knew he looked bad. Waiting for him at the station was Rick, who, seeing his friend's gloomy appearance, immediately sensed something was wrong. "What's wrong with you? You look like a zombie. Did something happen last night?" Andrew lowered his eyes. "Yes. Test results, it turned out that Liam is not my son." Rick turned pale. "Damn. I'm sorry, friend. So what now?" "I kicked her out. I couldn't cope with this pain." She's been lying all these years. I don't know how to live on. Rick glanced quickly around, closing the office door so that no one would eavesdrop. I understand your anger. But what about Liam? You loved the boy. Don't start, Rick. It's too hard for me to even think about it right now. Andrew clenched his teeth, feeling something tearing in his chest. They sat down at the table and laid out the case materials. The notes obtained from Sheila, the testimony of Wayne Roberts, the analysis of evidence from the junkyard where Tom's car was found. Everything indicated that Tom was at least connected to Brooke's murder, but direct evidence that it was he who dealt the fatal blow was still lacking. We're close, Rick said. The prosecutor is reviewing our materials to issue a search warrant for Marcus Wells' mansion. If there really are papers there that prove their machinations, we will be able to squeeze both Tom and Marcus. Let's see this through to the end, Andrew answered quietly, looking hard at the photographs. If Tom is a murderer, he will answer in full. He added to himself, and for getting into my life. During the day, Andrew immersed himself in work to drown out his mental pain. But every time he vented his anger at potential witnesses or yelled into the phone, Rick gently pulled him back. Be careful, don't lose your head. We need facts, not emotions. In the evening, the sheriff called them to his place and said, there is something interesting. Our people spotted Tom Doyle in the western part of the city. He seems to be trying to meet someone. We want to detain him for questioning. The two of you will go together. Andrew felt his insides tighten. Finally, a chance to look Tom in the eyes and ask him directly about everything. But at work, he had no right to ask personal questions after all. Everything must go according to the letter of the law. When he and Rick arrived at the place where, according to informants, Tom might appear, it was already getting dark. An area in front of an old warehouse, several rusty containers, dim lights. 2 patrolmen remained in the car in case reinforcements were needed. Rick took out his binoculars. Do you see that figure over there? I think it's Tom. And with him were a couple of thugs. Andrew took a closer look. A man of average height, stocky, his face was illuminated only by the sidelight of a lantern, but a predatory grin and a self-confident pose were clearly visible. This could very well be the person who ruined their lives. We're approaching, but without making any noise, Andrew said, checking the gun. They got out of the car and began to carefully walk around the warehouse so as not to get caught right away. Suddenly, there was a loud bang, and the trio at the container noticed movement. Tom turned around and shouted, "Police, let's go," and started to run. "Stop, police," Rick shouted, raising his weapon. Tom, taking advantage of the commotion, managed to dive into the shadow of the warehouse. Rick and Andrew raced after him, running from cover to cover. Finally, Andrew, cutting off Tom's path to retreat, drove him into a dead end, a warehouse wall without doors. Tom was pressed against the wall, gasping, eyes wide with panic, but maintaining a brazen expression on his face. "Hands up," Andrew shouted. Immediately, Tom raised his hands, but the grin did not leave his face. "Well, hello, detective. We haven't seen each other for a long time. I've heard a lot about you, especially from Sheila." Andrew's heart skipped a beat. The urge to hit this bastard was terrible, but professional duty screamed, "Don't go beyond the bounds." "Shut up." Weapons to the ground. Tom lowered his left hand slightly and threw the gun to the side. But Andrew didn't stop looking into his eyes. "Sorry if something went wrong with you and Sheila, but she is a grown woman and wanted to have fun herself. Why do you need to be a good husband if women sometimes want something spicy on the side?" Andrew felt anger boil in his blood. He took a step forward, almost pinning Tom against the wall, the gun resting on his chest. "Shut up, bastard. One more word and I." He clenched his teeth, trying to pull himself together. "You're under arrest for suspicion of murdering Roger Brooks. I warn you, anything you say can be used against you in court." Tom laughed contemptuously. "Murder? I didn't touch Brooks. Let your experts look for evidence. I wish them good luck." Rick arrived from behind, quickly twisted Tom's hands and handcuffed him. At the same time, Tom continued to grin. "Turn around, Carter, in your suspicions." Andrew pushed Tom away so hard he nearly fell to the ground. Rick only managed to curse. "Calm down, partner." Andrew exhaled as he watched the patrolman run up. His lips turned white with suppressed rage. Tom was in their hands, but what he said sounded like a mockery of everything Andrew held dear. Thus, Tom's arrest took place, but the cost of emotional effort for Andrew turned out to be colossal. He understood that there would still be a lot of interrogations, papers, and trials ahead, and the pain of personal betrayal only became sharper when Tom provoked him by mentioning Sheila and their fun time. That evening, having already returned to the station, Andrew could not sleep. Tom's mocking face and Sheila's burning gaze flashed before my eyes as she asked for forgiveness. But forgiveness seemed impossible. A new day dawned and Tom Doyle was placed in an interrogation facility. Marcus Wells seemed to be out of town, perhaps lying low, suspecting that the police were on his trail. There was excitement in the station. "We've finally got Tom Doyle down. Now the chances of solving Brooks' murder are increasing," the police said. But Andrew was depressed. The life he dreamed of was crumbling. What difference does it make now that they catch the killer if everything in his own house is dead? Rick felt that his friend was on the verge of a nervous breakdown, made him put aside his paperwork and get out into the fresh air. They got into a company car together and drove around the outskirts, where they had to interview a couple of witnesses. But on the way, Rick turned off the engine on the side of the road, away from prying ears. "Listen, Andrew," he began calmly, "I understand that everything is going to hell for you now. But you can't give up like that. You need to speak up." Andrew looked out the window at the gray fields. "I'm not giving up, it's just, I feel like my heart has been ripped out of me. I spent 5 years raising Liam, and now I realize that I was lied to. Not only Sheila, but everyone who knew Melissa, maybe one of the neighbors. Everyone was silent. Melissa was afraid for Sheila," Rick said. "So it happened," Andrew grinned darkly. "But now it turns out that I'm left alone. I don't even know who Liam's father is, and it looks like Sheila doesn't know either." Rick put his hand on his friend's shoulder. "Listen, I'm not a psychologist, but I advise you not to rush into making final decisions about the boy. If you still love him, and he loves you, then you should think about it. DNA isn't everything. I understand your anger, but anger is a bad advisor. I understand that Liam is not to blame for anything," Andrew said bitterly. "But when he looks at me, I feel that I have no right to say, 'I am your father.'" "You have the right to be his dad, even if you're not his biological father," Rick countered softly. "Dad is the one who raised, who loved, and not necessarily the one who conceived." Andrew shuddered, realizing that Rick was right, but Sheila's betrayal cast a shadow over all his memories. How to trust again if everything was built on lies? "I don't know what I want," Andrew continued, rubbing his forehead. "On the one hand, I hate her for her betrayal, but on the other, I see how she herself suffers. And Liam, he feels everything. The children understand everything." Rick looked at his watch. "You know, maybe you should give yourself time, but don't cut everything off in one fell swoop. And now we are interrogating Tom. We need to get a confession out of him. Let's get together and finish this thing, and then we'll see what happens next." Andrew nodded, exhaled, and tried to pull himself together. Job. Only work so far gave him at least some support. They returned to the station, went to the interrogation room, where Tom Doyle was already sitting at the table, handcuffed. A short smile played on his lips, although there was tension in his eyes. "How did you sleep, Tom?" Rick asked politely, sitting down opposite. Tom just shrugged. "Fine. The cell in your area is quite cozy, thank you." "Well, let's get down to business," Andrew said with cold determination. "We know about your meetings with Roger Brooks and about your conflicts. Tell me why he threatened you." Tom shook his head. "There was no conflict. We did things together, then he disappeared. I don't know who killed him." Rick turned on the recorder and continued. "We have a witness, Wayne Roberts, who claims that it was you who carried out the dirty assignments of Marcus Wells, intimidating people. and Brooks was unhappy with the distribution of profits. A witness, Tom stretched his lips with contempt, who stole himself and is now trying to rat everyone out in order to get out. His testimony is not worth a penny. What about physical evidence? Andrew asked, pulling out a photo of their found recordings transcripts of Tom and Marcus' conversations. This clearly speaks of eliminating the problem with Brooks, and the voice sounds very similar to yours. Tom grinned, but tensed noticeably. Any records can be fabricated. Let the examination prove their authenticity. The interrogation lasted about an hour. Tom did not make a direct confession. He denied everything, assuring that everything was pinned on him. But at some point, when Andrew paused, looking him straight in the face, he abruptly got personal. "You know, Detective, I'm sorry that your wife wasn't so honest. But excuse me, some women love adventure." "Be careful what you say," Andrew hissed, feeling his anger boil. "And what? Don't tell me you didn't see her in bed when she was pregnant. She was so passionate." Then Andrew flew out from the table. Tom wheezed and grinned. "Oh, it touched a nerve, didn't it?" Rick struggled to pull Andrew away, shouting, "Cool down, Andrew. Do you want to give him a reason to close the case?" With great effort, he broke free and left the room, slamming the door. He stopped in the corridor, pressing his fists against the wall, trying to catch his breath. Rick followed him out, taking a quick glance back so that the officers were watching Tom. "Damn, buddy, you can't act like that. You may be suspended." Andrew was breathing heavily. "I know." Rick squeezed his shoulder. "Pull yourself together. We are close to proving his guilt. Don't give him a chance to derail our investigation." Andrew nodded, forcing himself to calm down. But everything continued to boil inside, and again I remembered the image of Sheila, the tears on her face. He couldn't understand how his whole life had collapsed so quickly. The next couple of days were spent executing a search warrant for Marcus Wells' mansion. The prosecutor, having familiarized himself with the materials, finally gave the green light. A group of operatives, including Andrew and Rick, went to the outskirts of the city to a luxurious house surrounded by a high stone fence. Negotiations on voluntary admission were difficult. The mansion's security first stated that the owner was not there, and a search could not be carried out without him. But after presenting documents and calling the sheriff, they were forced to open the gate. The inside of the mansion was decorated with expensive furnishings, marble floors, expensive carpets, massive furniture. A safe was found in one of the offices, and after some manipulation by a burglar from the police department, access to the documents was gained. There, papers were found relating to real estate transactions, the names of Brooks, Roberts, Doyle were indicated. There were references to veiled payments to offshore accounts. But the main find was a document in which the phrase appeared in black and white: payment for eliminating problem counterparties. The signatures on the contract belonged to Marcus Wells and Roger Brooks. However, who directly removed Brooks remained unclear. But here, in the folder, there was a handwritten note: Tom D. Bonus for completing the task. The date coincided with the day Brooks disappeared. This was almost direct evidence that Tom was hired to solve problems. Rick, leafing through the documents, whistled. "Looks like this is it." Marcus hired Tom to resolve the issue with Brooks, who apparently began to demand too much, or wanted to hand them over. "Crap, so Tom?" asked one of the operatives. "More likely, he organized the murder," Andrew explained, clutching the sheets of paper in his hands. "Or maybe he personally participated, because traces of the struggle with Brooks are minimal. It could have been one precise strike." While they were studying the documents, a noise was heard at the entrance. Security let Sarah Wells, Marcus's wife, in. She was clearly excited to see the police rummaging through papers. "What's happening? How dare you meddle in the personal affairs of my family?" Andrew turned to her. "Mrs. Wells, we have a warrant. Your husband is involved in corrupt and possibly bloody schemes. Where is he now?" Sarah's eyes darted, but she tried to control herself. I don't know. Marcus and I haven't been too close lately. However, from the papers that they found, It was already becoming obvious. Marcus was the customer, Tom was the performer. Brooks is a victim who has become problematic. Now all that's left to do is find Marcus himself and bring charges. Later that day, after comparing the evidence and testimony, the police formally charged Tom with murder by prior conspiracy. Arrest. He just grinned, but understood that things were bad. "Well, Carter, congratulations, you caught me," he said during a short meeting in the corridor. "But know that Marcus won't let you break me just like that. And say hi to Sheila." Andrew, restraining himself, did not answer, turned around and left, only his heart was beating like crazy with rage. Thus ended the search for Roger Brooks' killer. Officially, the police were preparing loud statements, but there was emptiness inside Andrew's soul. He solved a serious crime and fulfilled his duty. However, the stranglehold of betrayal in his personal life was more suffocating. Yes, Tom is detained, but Sheila managed to inflict a wound that may never heal. When everything had calmed down, he tiredly sat down on a chair in his office. An hour later, Rick came to him. "I heard that Marcus apparently crossed the state line and is trying to escape. But we have passed on the guidelines to all districts. I think they will take him. It's a matter of time." Andrew nodded absently. "Fine. Let them catch it." Rick sat down opposite him, looking at his friend sympathetically. "I understand how bad it feels for you, but at least you did your duty, and with a personal tragedy. Try not to destroy yourself from the inside." "I don't know, Rick. It feels like everything is lost. Even if I ever forgive Sheila, I won't be able to shake the question. Why did she lie for so long?" At that moment, an officer came and said, "Carter, you have a visitor. Sheila Carter. Or rather, just Sheila. She's waiting at the entrance, saying it's urgent." Andrew felt his heart squeezing. Over the past days, she had not tried to get through to him, only writing a few messages. "Now I came in person. What does she want?" "I don't want to see her," he said coldly. "Maybe you can talk," Rick suggested. "Otherwise, you'll be tormented by guesswork." Andrew hated the situation, but knew that sooner or later he would have to face it. Sheila waited in the small foyer. Her clothes were wrinkled, dark circles under her eyes indicated that she had hardly slept. When she saw Andrew, she clasped her hands and stood up, as if she hoped he would come to her. "What do you want?" he asked quietly, stopping a couple of meters away. "Andrew, I know that you have already found Brooks' killer and put Tom away. I wanted to tell you. Thank you. And one more thing. Liam and I are currently living with Melissa, but it's not very convenient there." "And," he said coldly, "maybe you'll let us go back. I don't know, maybe we won't interfere in your life. It's just, this is my home too." Instead of answering, Andrew remembered how he kicked her out last night, how everything went downhill. The anger rose again. Does she really think that everything can be returned, despite the fact that Liam is not my son, and I don't even know who he's from? I don't want to continue this conversation. Look for another place to live. I said I need space, and it's not enough for me yet. He turned to leave, but Sheila grabbed his arm. "Wait, forgive me. I know I ruined everything, and in the end it only made things worse. Yes, worse. For everyone, first of all for Liam," Andrew said bitterly, tearing his hand away. "But Sheila, this is your cross, not mine." He turned around and walked resolutely towards the stairs, leaving her standing in the foyer with tears in her eyes. Perhaps he was making an irreparable mistake, but the pain was too strong. Several days passed, and the city was rocked by news that the police had arrested Tom Doyle and were searching for Marcus Wells. Everyone was discussing scandal, corruption, murder. But for Andrew, all this became the background emptiness reigned in his soul. He continued to live in an empty house, where he forbade Sheila to return. He slept poorly, often had dreams where Liam would reach out to him and call him Daddy, and then suddenly disappear into the darkness. Woke up in a cold sweat. Soon he was faced with another painful task, checking the documents of the late Uncle Jack. Once upon a time, Andrew was raised by his uncle in strictness and taught him not to give in to emotions. Andrew often found himself wondering how Jack would react if he found out that Sheila was deceiving his nephew. He probably would have said, "Boy, don't be a wuss, do what's fair." While collecting Jack's papers, Andrew found old letters and diary entries. In one place, my uncle wrote, "The most important thing in life is to be able to forgive. But sometimes forgiveness is impossible without the truth, without the person sincerely repenting." Ironic, Andrew muttered. How to take the first step when the soul is torn. In addition, he was tormented by the thought, what if Liam ends up on the street without me? Will Sheila be able to pull it all out on her own? On the other hand, the guy did not want to step towards the traitor. The melancholy gradually grew into a fierce determination. I need to leave, start over. This decision matured in him every day. He understood that the memory of his shame remained in the city. All the neighbors were whispering, and the sight of familiar places reminded of family happiness, which turned out to be false. While official business was going on, Rick tried to support his friend, although he saw that Andrew was getting worse. One day, he called him to Sid's bar and tried to entertain him. But Andrew didn't have the strength to joke or chat. He sat silently, turning the glass in his hands. I think I need to quit the police, he suddenly said quietly. Sid, who was standing nearby, shuddered, and Rick almost choked. Are you crazy? You are an excellent detective, an honor to the city. I'm tired, Andrew snapped, and my reputation is now sullied. Everyone asks why my wife was involved with a bandit. Everyone looks at me with pity. Rick clenched his fists. They don't care about your personal life. The crime is solved, that's the main thing. Sid poured him more soda. Where are you going? I don't know for sure. Maybe I'll find a job in another state. I don't care, Andrew replied with a shrug. The main thing is, away from memories and these streets where I was happy and became unhappy. Rick sighed heavily. I don't want to lose my best partner. But I understand. If this is your choice, I will support it. Thank you, friend. Andrew looked at him with sad eyes. Horror swayed inside at the thought that he was giving up everything he had achieved over many years. But staying here, among the wreckage of life, was too painful. By this point, Sheila was having her own difficulties. She and Liam lived with Melissa in a cramped room. The child, feeling the tense situation, often asked, when will we go to Daddy? Why doesn't Dad call? Sheila pretended that everything was fine, but at night she cried, locking herself in the bathroom. One evening she asked Melissa for leave, leaving Liam to her friend, and went to Andrew's house. She was scared, but there was nowhere to retreat. I knocked on the door, no one answered. I dared to open it slightly, and it turned out that the door was not locked. The house was almost empty. Some of the furniture had been removed or covered with sheets. The closets are empty, no things of hers, no familiar objects. Sheila walked into the living room and saw only boxes and bags. There was silence, as if no one had lived in the house for many days. Andrew, are you here? She called, her voice sounding muffled. There was no answer. She looked into the bedroom. It was also half empty. There were a couple of shirts lying on the bed, and there was a suitcase in which Andrew, apparently, was collecting the remains of his things. He's leaving, Sheila thought, and her heart sank. She sat down on the edge of the bed, glancing at the family photo that lay next to her. It showed the three of them, Andrew, her, and Liam, cheerful and smiling. What a terrible thing I did, Sheila whispered, tears welling up in her eyes again. If I had confessed earlier, maybe everything would have been different. She put the photo down and was about to get up when Andrew appeared at the door. His face showed rage at the sight of Sheila in the house. What are you doing here? Sheila froze, trying to compose herself. I need to talk. I know you're planning to leave. Please listen to me one last time. Speak quickly, he muttered, standing in the doorway and crossing his arms. Marcus can come back. Sarah warned me that he wouldn't leave it like that. Tom is in prison, and I know Marcus has a lot of connections left. This is dangerous for you, and for me, and for Liam. Andrew smiled coldly. So you came to ask me to protect you. Once again, I have to solve your problems. Sheila lowered her eyes. Sorry, I didn't mean to. But I'm afraid for Liam. He was silent for several seconds, then sighed heavily. Listen, I already did what I could. We planted Tom. They are looking for Marcus in all states. What else do you want from me? I want you to know, if everything could be turned back, I would never lie. I regret everything. And yes, I dreamed that you would become Liam's dad because you are the best person I have known, despite all our mistakes. Andrew turned away, staring at the wall. I can't turn back time, and I don't want to get stabbed in the back again. Sheila bit her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks. I understand. But remember, if Marcus shows up, we'll have to stick together. He may be taking revenge for the fact that you imprisoned Tom, and for the fact that I exposed their schemes. Andrew didn't answer, just walked to the window and looked gloomily at the street. Then he said quietly, if he shows up, just let him try to hurt Liam. I will protect the boy. But I'm sorry, I don't want to see you in my life. I'm tired of forgiving. Sheila closed her eyes. I'm not asking you to come back to me. I just want you to know that I am grateful for everything you have done. And if you decide to talk to Liam, I'll be only too glad. Andrew swallowed convulsively. The thought of the boy still scratched his soul because he loved him like a son. But Sheila's betrayal poisoned everything. Taking the photograph from the table, Sheila looked at Andrew again. Sorry, once again. And she left, leaving behind silence and the bitter aroma of perfume. Andrew stood motionless for a minute, then tore the sheet off the bed, crumpled it up, and threw it furiously into the corner. Anger and pain came in waves, burning out everything alive in his heart. Liam, having lost his familiar home and familiar routine, became withdrawn. He smiled a little, asked Sheila why Dad didn't come, why they didn't go home. Sheila, feeling guilty, tried to calm her son down, but the boy still suffered. His childish psyche did not understand where his beloved father had disappeared. One day, Melissa, walking past the room, heard Liam quietly crying and muttering, I want to go to Dad. It sounded like a knife in the heart. Melissa came in, sat down next to him, and tried to hug the boy. You know, Dad is busy, but he loves you very much. It's just that things are difficult for him right now. And Mom said that we can't live at home for now. Is it because of me? Liam asked, wiping away his tears. Melissa forced a smile. No, honey, it's because of adults. They sometimes make mistakes. It's not your fault. In the evening, Sheila held Liam on her lap and tried to tell a fairy tale, but every time she got to the brave king, the image of Andrew popped up in her head. He had once been a knight on a white horse for her. Tears choked her voice, and she only hugged the child tighter to her chest. Mom, shall we go back to Dad? Liam asked again. I don't know, she answered barely audibly, but inside everything was screaming. How did I let my life get to this point? Meanwhile, Andrew, having resigned from the police immediately after the completion of the reporting on Tom's case, was collecting his last things in the house, formalizing the sale or rental of housing. He decided to leave radically, to leave the city so as not to see those places where everything reminded of happiness that no longer exists. Sheila tried to contact him several times to ask him to at least see Liam, but he refused. He didn't answer calls. He wrote briefly to messages, not now. On one of these days, Melissa couldn't stand it and called Andrew herself. Hello, this is Melissa. Listen, what are you doing? The boy is suffering. He thinks you left him. I don't know what to say, Andrew said quietly. I don't want to see Sheila. I don't want to make a scandal in front of the child. For God's sake, take at least a step towards him, not her, but him. Melissa begged, don't ruin the boy's life. Andrew was silent for a second, then answered dully. He will be better off without me. I can't pretend to be Dad anymore. And he cut off the connection. Melissa, feeling powerless, closed her eyes. She could only hope that time would heal this wound or at least soften it. While Andrew's personal life was in chaos, investigators from other counties were searching for Marcus Wells. A couple of weeks later, out of the blue, news arrived. Marcus had been spotted in a neighboring state, traveling under a false name and attempting to cross the border towards Mexico. But he was stopped at a checkpoint. A pursuit ensued and Wells was detained. True, he turned out to have fake documents, and during the search they found a large amount of cash. After confirming his identity, the police escorted him back, where he faced charges of corruption, extortion, and organizing the murder of Brooks. When Andrew found out about this, he was already in the process of finalizing his departure from the city. But the sheriff asked him to give official testimony in the case because Detective Carter led the entire operation and detained Tom. Andrew could not refuse and appeared in court for a preliminary hearing. The courtroom was full of journalists and lawyers. Marcus Wells sat at the defendant's table, looking tired but still exuding cool confidence. When he met Andrew's gaze, his face twisted into a contemptuous grimace. "Mr. Carter," the judge addressed him, "do you confirm that the materials and expert opinions you provided are true?" "Yes, Your Honor," Andrew answered, trying to speak evenly and calmly. Marcus stood up from his seat, looking around the audience. "Your Honor, I am a respected businessman. I was slandered by subordinates who wanted to cover up their own crimes. All these papers are fabricated, and Tom Doyle's testimony is a lie." Andrew heard his speech and could hardly restrain a contemptuous grin. How cleverly he was trying to get out. But now the evidence was strong because experts confirmed the authenticity of the documents, and in addition to Tom, there was also Wayne Roberts, and even Sarah Wells partially testified against her husband. The preliminary hearing ended with the judge denying Wells bail given the severity of the charges and his attempted escape. Marcus was eager to comment on something, but security took him out of the hall. Andrew went outside into a light drizzle. Journalists tried to interview him, but he did not want to say anything. "I wanted only one thing, to quickly finish all the procedures and leave." On the porch of the court, he saw Sheila with Liam. The boy held her hand, and when he saw Andrew, his eyes filled with hope. "Dad." The word "Dad" sounded like thunder in the silence. Andrew froze. Sheila let go of her son's hand, and he took a step forward, but Andrew did not move. Everything inside broke off. Liam stood looking at him. Perhaps he was waiting for Andrew to open his arms and say, "Son, I missed you." But Andrew couldn't. The bitterness was suffocating. He silently turned away and walked to the car. Liam looked at his mother in despair, barely holding back tears. "Mom, doesn't Dad love me anymore?" Sheila bit her lip, tears streaming down her cheeks. He just needs time, baby." But in the depths of her soul, she realized, perhaps he would never take back either her or the child. Andrew drove away without looking back. As the car disappeared around the bend, the rain began to fall heavier, and Sheila stood under the gray sky, hugging her son, who was sobbing. "I want to go to my dad." And she didn't know what to answer. A few days later, Andrew locked his house, which he had already put up for sale, for the last time and loaded his suitcase into the trunk of his car. He resigned from the department and signed all the necessary papers. The sheriff and colleagues tried to persuade him to think again, but he was adamant. "Good luck, Carter," Rick said goodbye to him, hugging his friend. "If you change your mind, we will only be glad to have you back." "Thank you, but I decided I need to leave." Sid said goodbye to him, giving him a bottle of whiskey for the road, but Andrew refused. He was not a fan of alcohol. Sid just smiled and patted him on the shoulder. "Take care of yourself. Maybe one day you'll come back." Everyone felt that he was leaving not only because of work, but to escape his memories. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think, click to the next one.